So 2 years ago in Rome, the U.S. Ryder Cup team was called out by critics for what many called their disgraceful preparation. Many people said they were far too rusty, coming off of 5 weeks of rest, headed into that big event. Well, this time, Keegan Bradley is not taking any chances. He is sending the majority of the team to play in this week's Procore Championship. And on top of that, he's renting a massive house for all of the players to get together and try to gel. But they're not the only team who's preparing here. On the other side, we've got the European Ryder Cup team, and Rory McIlroy is talking about how the entire team is more accomplished than they were 2 years ago. And of course, that was a winning team. But they're going to need to be ready because they're coming into what many are calling the cauldron. And it's going to be a very difficult environment for the European team to win. In fact, it's been 10 years since a Ryder Cup team has won from the away standpoint, coming in and trying to play, against the dominant home forces. But they've got a little bit of help on their side as well. We're going to talk in a second about how Ian Poulter is weighing in, a guy who's come in clutch a lot of times on the Ryder Cup and was on that, miracle at Medina, where the Medina team came back from behind the European team and won at Medina all those years ago. So he's lending a lot of his inspiration and his insight into how this team can play better. But of course, I want to dive into talking about what exactly Keegan's doing to try to not make some of the mistakes that we saw Zach Johnson, arguably, mistakes that he had made in getting his team ready and gelled and in form to play. So we're going to talk about that Procore, and I want to talk about some quotes coming from Rory McIlroy of why he thinks that this team is in position to make history and beat that U.S. team, even with that electricity that will be the Bethpage Black and that New York crowd.
It's going to be loud, man.
It is. It's going to be exciting.
So loud.
So we got a lot to dive into. First, of course, we want to thank this week's sponsor, Titleist. And guys, Titleist is always looking for ways to help you shoot lower scores. And the golf ball you play makes a huge difference. So here's something you should know about. Alignment Integrated Marking, or AIM, are alignment lines precisely printed on your Titleist golf ball. And AIM Performance is a tour-inspired 105-degree line available in red, black, blue, or pink. And if you're wondering why use AIM, well, AIM technology has been found to help golfers be up to 35% more precise in lining up putts, giving you way more confidence in lining up the target line off of the tee. And Mike, who doesn't want that? 35%, the numbers are in there.
I'll take it.
Right? I'll take that all day long. So both that AIM Performance and AIM Enhanced are available on Pro V1, Pro V1 X, Pro V1 X Left Dash. So whichever ball you're playing, you do have that option. And if you want to see them, really to appreciate what they've done with these new designs, go and check them out, Titleist.com. You can see all the new AIM markings today. And, on the greens, it's where it makes a big difference. Of course, we're going to talk about that here at the Ryder Cup. But if you can get just that much more precision in lining up, more putts are going to drop. So go and check them out. So my kind of that quick rewind, again, going back to it, what a lot of Monday morning quarterback, hindsight's 2020. I get all that. But as people try to decompress and say, what happened in Rome? Why did the, U.S. team kind of not perform up to what a lot thought was their capability?
Yeah.
Because on paper, it was a very stacked team. And one thing that came back, and again, critics even going so far as use the word disgraceful, saying that they were just not prepared. And at that time, if you remember, there was about 5 weeks between the Tour Championship and the Ryder Cup. And in that 5 weeks, most of the U.S. team had not competed. We're going to talk in a second about how the European team was more prepared in that way because the DP World Tour continues, and we're even outside of that. Even guys like Rahm with Liv are playing, and we're kind of talk about that schedule and how these guys stay in form. But it's one thing that we know. It's there's that old debate. It's rest versus rust, right? And a lot of people might say, hey, this is great. These guys come in super rested. But we've even heard guys like Tiger and others who talk about this. There's something with competition golf and staying in form that you can quickly slip out of that rhythm.
Sure, absolutely.
So a lot have said that those guys should have found a way to be playing in competition, somewhere to bridge that gap between the Tour Championship and the Ryder Cup back in 23.
Oh, I think it's It's brilliant. I love that all like at least 10 of the 12 are playing. I know Bryson can't play this week. And who's the other guy? Xander?
I believe it's Xander is the other guy who's not going to be there.
Yeah, which he's played in the Napa event before Xander. Maybe something he's just nursing something. But I love what Keegan's doing. Keegan has the most pressure on him. He does. You're absolutely right. You said it before. He does not want to repeat what Zach Johnson in 2023. I think the team. I don't know why they didn't gel, but I kind of feel like with all like the Keegan getting snubbed, should JT be here? There was so much going on for the U.S. team. I feel like they couldn't come together, right?
Yeah.
And this is why they're doing it. I think it's brilliant that he put the guys up in a house. If there's any way to bring you guys together, put them together in a frat house.
Listen, and I think one thing that was worrying even for me as a fan was watching the juxtaposition between the two press conferences where the captain's picks were announced. And, it made its way on social media. A lot of people kind of taking screenshots and saying it looked like a boring Zoom call meeting, right? Where you had all of the captain's guys and not a smile on any of their faces. It just seemed a little bit distant and not, like as we said, the users were gelled together, compared to watching Luke Donald in the Ryder Cup, captain's picks on the European side. And these guys looked excited. There was personality, even John Rahm, like showing his, some of his Star Wars collectibles. There was just more smiles in the room. And it just seemed, this intangible that you can all day, you can compare stats and you can talk about, individual accomplishments like guys like Scottie Scheffler, et cetera. But this is a team event and it's a different dynamic. So I was starting to get a little bit nervous. Like, how are these guys going to gel? So exactly what Keegan's doing is he's now encouraged as many of his guys as possible to play in the Procore, which is an event that most of them, let's be honest, would have sat out. This is the FedEx Cup fall season. This is usually the events where the non-household names are using these events to try to retain their tour card, win back their tour card if they drop out of that top 125. I would imagine some of those guys aren't happy to see.
Can you imagine showing up
the
and
leaderboard?
At the field?
Right.
Oh, man.
And now everybody shows up, and now you got to beat Scottie Scheffler. I get it. But the idea is saying we're going to bridge that gap and that not going to have another 5 weeks where these guys are sitting home resting or just practicing. Smart. There's a huge difference between practice and being in competition, and these guys thrive on staying in form. On top of that, and I believe it was the New York Post that was first reporting on this, but what was said was that the U.S. Ryder Cup team has rented a large house near the Silverado Resort in Napa, California, where the Procore Championship is being held. And what they reported on was saying the house includes a team room designed to replicate the atmosphere of Ryder Cup week. The goal is to build camaraderie and unity among players, which U.S. captain Keegan Bradley hopes will improve the team's performance. So, not even just putting the guys in the same house, he's even trying to replicate the atmosphere with a team room similar to it. And I think that is, again, it shows that I think Keegan, whether they win or lose, I think it'll go down that Keegan did everything he should to try to prepare this team.
Maybe almost everything.
What do you think he missed?
Putting himself on the team. But we'll see what happens when we get there.
Right.
We'll see if some of the picks he picked
that might be the only thing that he gets second guessed on.
Absolutely. But you think it's a boys' trip? No spouses out in Napa this week? Is he trying to bring the boys together or what?
Yeah, you think now a lot of the guys on the team, not only the wives, but the kids,
Right.
I think there's a lot that we're not privy to of whether that's a motivation or a distraction for them.
Yeah.
I think he'll have to find a way that out. But I think what he wants is these guys to start to feel like as a team. Yeah. And I think that getting together for 4 days, or a full week, in the same house is a fantastic way to do it.
I think so.
And I think that it's something that if it does prove to work, might be a model that gets replicated in future years where maybe, the entire prep formula changes and you'll start to see these guys playing in a fall series event to try to get ready and stay in form. Because on the other side of the pond, you've got a very, momentum-driven European team.
Hottest golfers on the planet over there.
And you've got them all right in the thick of competition. First of all, Rory McIlroy just coming off a huge, big, motivating win, coming back to win the Irish Open in spectacular fashion.
Yeah, huge.
Draining a huge eagle and just really getting the crowds behind him. And then on top of that, you're headed into the BMW PGA Championship at Wentworth, and you've got pretty much the entire European team is in that
They're
field.
doing their thing.
You've got Fleetwood, McIlroy, Hatton, Lowry, Fitzpatrick, and another big name
John Rahm,
who
right?
is a favorite to win.
Yeah.
John Rahm is
Absolutely.
a favorite to win there.
He totally could win that one. Geez, they're all playing in that too, huh?
They're all playing it.
I'm sticking with my prediction. I said it a couple weeks ago. I think Europe comes in and they feed off the negative New York energy and they just wipe the floor. But keep going.
I think that's a very good point to make. I think that energy can work both ways.
Exactly.
If you know how to harness it, which is why in a second we'll get into talking about some of those quotes from Ian Poulter, who's trying to coach that team on saying how to use that negative energy and turn it into something positive.
The whole like this move and shoving it down their throats.
Exactly. They could very well feed off that. But what we will see now is both teams coming in competition form. Now, the pendulum can swing the other way, and if either team doesn't perform well, then you can start to speculate, well, were they not rested enough? But if nothing else, we're going to at least possibly take that off the table, that there's an idea of too much rest, much going too long. So you've got, like I said, not only the usual suspects, but the one where you may feel like a guy like Hatton or Rahm, who traditionally aren't playing every week on a DP World Tour. They're in that event. They're going to be playing. And even you've got a guy like Rahm, who's coming off the momentum of just winning the team event on LIV.
That's right.
Beating out Bryson DeChambeau there. And like, what kind of psychological effects that might have. He beats Bryson's team, the Crushers. They win. I think what you're showing here is you're building an incredible amount of momentum for what, like I keep saying, I think might be the best Ryder Cup we've had in decades.
It's going to be the best, dude. It's going to be so electric. I can't wait. And we get to go Thursday, which I'm interested in knowing. They don't play any golf on Thursday. It's just practice rounds. Like, it's no competition.
No competition.
But they're just out there playing.
Right. Yeah. The competition's Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
That's awesome.
So let's talk really quickly about some of those comments that Rory had made, which is another interesting thing, because if you look at it on paper, the U.S. Ryder Cup team obviously has more rookies, Ryder Cup rookies, because essentially the European Ryder Cup team is exactly the same team, substituting one of the Hogard brothers.
Yep.
So that's right. The only difference is substituting one of those, which in a way is hard to argue with on Luke Donald's side. You win, and your team is that gelled and playing well together. To a certain extent, you got to run it back, right?
Run it back. That's why they ran back the same captain too.
Right. It's a run it back year.
It's a run it back year. It's almost like you said, the same exact team, one brother swapped.
Right.
Absolutely. Run it back.
And when Rory was recently asked on this, what really is the difference here? Because being about the same team, he pointed out something which is very true, and basically saying that pretty much every player on that team is more accomplished than they were 2 years ago in
100%.
Rome. When they were a winning team, if you go down that list, and he's right, if you really think about it, you think about guys like Fleetwood, right?
PGA Tour event, first event on U.S. soil.
And if I remember, I'm trying to remember correctly, was it Fleetwood is the one who posted the winning point, right? And I think it was even going back, it was he beat Ricky Fowler, right? And Ricky had like a kind of a longer concession.
Yes.
But they kind of saw the writing on the wall. It was over in Rome. But now think like for as good as a guy like Fleetwood was, it's true. He's in even a better position now. So the quote from Rory, he said, I think when we went to Rome, you had some guys that were purely foursome players, some guys that were purely four-ball players. I think now we have flexibility within that 12, whether it be foursomes or four-ball, and changing the dynamics around a little bit. I think it's something that will offer the team more flexibility than we had in Rome. Obviously, Rome worked out very, very well for us. But as you said, you could argue that pretty much every player on the team is more accomplished than they were 2 years ago. So this is important. I mean, this is even if we end up, depending on what happens, second guessing some of Keegan's picks and not, as you said earlier, picking himself. So much of it is not just individual form and how they're playing, but how you can structure and pair guys together in those foursome and four-ball matches.
Yep.
And what Rory is kind of hinting at was in 2023, there weren't as many options to move those pieces around. There were guys who were really specialists to play in the four-ball, foursome, whatever it may be. But now he's saying, depending, and this is, I think, largely why Keegan didn't take on that playing captain's role, was to be able to make those crucial in the moment decisions of after the morning sessions, who's going out in the afternoons.
Right. Yeah, no doubt.
And Keegan wanted an opportunity where he could witness everything himself and make those decisions and not have to rely on his vice captains. But what Rory's saying is on their side, there's far more opportunities where if a guy gets hot and he's playing well, he can be plugged in and it doesn't and are able to be paired up with other guys and play in other formats. And it's not as pigeonholed into kind of specialists for formats.
Yeah.
And that's important.
That's really important. They could be so, they can move things around so much. I don't know what it's like on the U.S. team. I mean, this is a different team than Rome. They're coming in much different.
Yeah, we're almost getting like a very similar team versus a very different team. Lots of rookies. Talk about Cameron. What do you call it?
Cam Young, and who else is the rookie? Is Ben Griffin.
Yes.
So you've got some rookies there. I think the cool thing about it is hopefully that the home crowd will work in those rookies' favor. It will help them, but I got to think they're going to be nervous as all hell. You know what I mean? So they're going to have nerves. It's going to be a dogfight. I love that it's like a defending championship team coming in to play a newer USA team.
Right.
So,
but if nothing else, this big kind of change by Keegan Bradley of making the guys play in that Procore will at least take off the table the idea that these guys are not in playing form, because they'll be in competition this week and they'll be ready to go, for Ryder Cup without that huge 5-week break. So you mentioned earlier the big crowds. That's what we got to talk about next. We got to talk about how the European team is preparing from this, even getting some outside guidance from long time, Ryder Cup veterans like Ian Poulter. So let's pause there. Let's do a word from our sponsors, and then I want to jump into that.
All right, guys, FootJoy has you covered with the latest performance footwear and apparel. They have everything you need, from shoes like the Premier Series, Hyperflex, the Quantums, layers for whatever weather condition you're faced with out there, cold, wet, rain. I mean, you name it, we're faced with it, but we love to go and continue to play. So Thermo Series for cool weather, Tempo Series, for the warmer weather, and of course the Hydro Series if you're going to get the downpour. Not to mention, guys, they have everything else you need for your golf game, accessories, gloves, of course. They have socks, belts, headwear.
As you're
so
saying
much
this,
more.
I'm going through my mind when we pack for our trip.
Yeah, just like all the things.
This is my checklist,
I'm rolling my
right?
FootJoy belt.
Right, because it's just like you never know. Even as seasons are changing and we're getting into that where we want that Thermo Series and stuff like that. But like when we travel, sometimes you don't know what weather you're going to get all week exactly.
You have no idea.
I'm always throwing that Hydro Series in there. I'm always getting a couple extra like layers that are kind of lifesavers to have.
And they're so light, they just roll up and you stuff them right in the side of the bag. So you don't even know they're there. Caddies aren't complaining about it. So FootJoy's obsessed with golf just like we are, and they've been doing it for over 100 years. So don't trust your game to anyone else. Trust it to FootJoy. Go check out everything at footjoy.com.
All right, so we left off talking about that interview from Rory, and in that same interview, he pointed out something really key here. He said, there's a reason that every Ryder Cup for the last 10 years has went to the home team. The home team do have a big advantage from the setup of the golf course to how partisan the crowd is.
Sure.
So we know that, like, you got two very, very evenly, in a lot of ways, matched teams with strengths that kind of balance each other out.
Yep.
And if the deciding factor, this comes down to half a point, you could almost give that to the home team in a lot of ways. But in order to overcome that, the European side is really going to have to find a way to, instead of fearing it, like embrace that and use that as motivation. So one bit of motivation, one part of that is Rory for his own personal self. Mm-hmm. Here's a guy who basically has said he's accomplished everything. This is the year he won his green jacket. What could he possibly have his sights on? And one big one is getting over that hurdle and, back-to-back Ryder Cup wins and winning, against that home crowd in a away environment. Mm-hmm. So he was asked a little bit about it and about that a possible away win. And what he said was, I'm very excited. I've said this repeatedly, but I think winning an away Ryder Cup is up there with one of the biggest achievements in the game, especially nowadays. If we were to win an away Ryder Cup with everything else that I've been through this year, 2025 would be the best year of my career.
No doubt.
That's saying a lot of a career that he's had.
Yeah.
Right? To cap it off for him, to win that would be, absolutely incredible. And that in itself serves as a huge motivation for him and even for the team around him to kind of support that and win for him.
Yeah, I mean, it makes total sense. I mean, he's absolutely right about winning in a way Ryder Cup being one of the biggest accomplishments in the game, especially New York City, of all places, right? But I think without that win, even if he loses the Ryder Cup, I still think it's his best career year. Players, Masters, career Grand Slam, and of course the Irish Open yesterday. I mean, whatever else he's done. But
I'm even sidebar interested to see what he does at the BMW PGA Championship.
You never know, he can win that.
Playing, he's going to have a little bit. I still think there's a little thorn in the side when it comes to live for him.
Absolutely.
I could still see a little motivation in wanting to go out there and beat Jon Rahm.
100%.
And Hatton.
100%.
So who knows? I mean, it could be an electric week there. But getting back to this, Bethpage Black, right? So many are saying it's going to be the cauldron. It's going to be the pressure boiling over on these guys and just what that will do for this team that arguably only really has one Ryder Cup rookie on it. So there's a lot of seasoned pros, but their last win was on European soil. It was in Rome. It's been a lot of years since they won on US soil. So, Ian Poulter, he's the perfect guy to weigh in on this, and he was trying to kind of give the team a little bit of his own insight. So I've got a quote from him here that I think is really important. He said, the home crowd themselves play a massive part. They will play a massive part again coming into this Ryder Cup. I think the team are all well aware of it. I think I've always embraced the fact of knowing the rowdiness of the away fans and trying to feed off their energy. I remember from Medina, it was all noise because they were crushing us pretty much all through Friday and Saturday until we decided to play for pride and to turn this thing around and actually go out there and be a bit stubborn and try to do damage limitation. We got past the damage limitation perspective and turned it into a victory. That's what they're going to need to do at Bethpage Black. And if you remember, like I said, that was called the Miracle at Medina. Mm-hmm. And I think that is a way that can, where silence can even speak louder than the loud crowds. If the European team can get out there and get some points on the board and show a bit of dominance and quiet the crowd down, now that takes so much of that crowd element out of it. If you can 100%. Kind of take the wind out of the sails of the home team's crowd, that silence can be deafening and really put pressure on the home team that now you got to give your guys something to cheer about. If that 100%. Crowd is quiet, that is a bad look on you.
Yeah, that's
so
tough.
There's a way to use that crowd to your advantage even when you're the away team.
Smart. I love that they're bringing in Pulse for that too. There's a guy who would know.
Right. Here's a guy who's fed off the pressure.
Absolutely.
Here's a guy who has lived for that, for quieting those crowds down and putting that dagger in the heart. So it shows that, and it makes you wonder, like, how much of it is that really that home field advantage versus like where the home team can have a lot of pressure to live up to, playing in front of your home crowd. And if you're not performing, it can be, like I said, that silence of the crowd can be deafening.
Yeah, no doubt about that.
So there's really, like I said, there's a lot that remains to be seen here. Really, I want to hear your take too. So put in the comments below, how much do you think that adding in that extra event and having the U.S. team play in that Procore Championship is going to, or is not going to make a difference? I want to hear what you guys think. But either way, it shows that Keegan Bradley is then once again creating an entire new playbook to try to erase any of the mistakes that were made last time that caused them to lose in Rome. But if they're going to win, they've got to come through a not only very hot, but very motivated European team. There's a lot that can make this thing very excited. Can't wait to witness it in my own eyes. Let us know what you guys think in the comments below. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll see you in the next one.